Hello, welcome to this presentation about the first phase of intervention design, the explore phase. What is really important is that you get out of the train. That's something that is kind of essential in intervention design. So try to think outside of the system that you are already in. I already explained the intervention design model. This is it. And we are starting with the first step or phase, the explore. And in the explore phase, we are doing a couple of things. Most importantly, we are exploring the subculture. And that means getting to know the subculture in and out. So this is really important because you need to know everything about the subculture to be able to, of course, also distract the trends that you are going to research. And the trends are important because they are the transformations that you are going to pick and try to get an idea how they will look like in the near future. So we have three steps in the process of the explore phase, and it's the define, the observe, and the frame. Define means that you are constantly trying to define what you are researching, what you are kind of exploring. And you are doing that by observing. So by doing research, field research, desk research, and also think about what you are doing. And with every kind of new bit of information, every new insight, you are going to redefine. And we are calling that framing. At the end of this phase, you will have a frame of a trend that you think is interesting enough to take to the next imagine phase. And the frame is a combination of the three levels that we've talked about a lot. So macro, meso, and micro. The tools we are using are the subculture map, the D-step, the 3Ms, the tropes, desk and field research, and also the anxiety matrix by K. Punk. So this is a subculture map. You already used it. And the first thing you do is fill in this with the information you already have. I'm giving an example in this presentation, and it will be vinyl collectors as a subculture. So if you fill in the D step for vinyl collectors, then it could look something like this. So I think what is really important is that I decided here to not dive into the ecological aspects and the political aspects of vinyl collection of the subculture because I think it's not really relevant. I think that the social, the economic, the technological and the demographics are way, way more interesting. So this is kind of the first kind of draft, the first kind of brainstorm about the big changes I see emerging from this subculture. So I think what is interesting is that it, for example, brings a bit of nostalgia back, but on the other hand, it also brings back the physical object as an object of desire. What it also does is that it brings back a sense of community, where you can listen to records and share the findings you have in music with others. So I think those are kind of really interesting aspects that are maybe worth taking with us in the next phase. After that, I'm filling in the 3Ms because I not only am interested, of course, in the transformations, in the long-term effects, or the things that that the subculture causes on the long term, but I'm also interested in the behavior that people in the subculture do and the rituals they have. So that's the meso level, and the micro level, of course, the products and services they use. I think this is quite clear. So after that, I fill in the subculture map, and it looks a bit like this. You can also see that I already kind of pinpointed a couple of trends that I think are interesting, namely the community aspects, listening and collecting together. It's kind of a new thing because music has become, since the 2000s, an individual experience, listening to music. Well, at least at your home or when you are kind of in the move. And also, I think it's interesting that it brings back the idea of a physical product and that good taste is also determined by the music you listen to. And it's kind of a meaningful consumption. Instead of just consuming as much music as there is, you really pinpoint the music that you find worthwhile. So it's kind of a shift with, or maybe a break even, with the classical neoliberal thought that every product is commodified and that it doesn't matter if a product has meaning or not. The only thing that's relevant is the price. So in vinyl collection, you see that the object itself, the vinyl, becomes meaningful again. And I think that's an interesting break with the situation we have at the moment in our neoliberal system. After that, of course, I'm going to do field research. So I'm going to record stores, I'm going to talk to people that collect records, I'm going to do the same rituals, I'm going to spin records, look at sleeves, maybe also buy vinyl, and maybe also organize a party where we can listen to vinyls to really understand what this subculture is all about. Of course, it's if it's a more extreme subculture, you can also play the fly on the wall thing. That means that you are not kind of actively involved in the subculture, but you are kind of looking at it from a slight distance. That also means that you're going to talk to people, but you are not actually going to be involved in what they are doing. In this case, vinyl collection, it's quite easy to be involved, so I did so. And of course, there was desk research. There were a lot of kind of good series. Has been written a lot about vinyl collection, etc. So this is quite easy to do, of course. And with desk research, also the tropes spring in mind. What references are there to pop culture? Well, I think if you look at vinyl a lot, one thing that emerges immediately was, for example, the HBO series Vinyl, about vinyl in the 70s, the kind of the heydays of vinyl. But there are, of course, more tropes. There are also these kind of magnificent albums that everybody's talking about, and that have this kind of magical value, this magical meaning. Everybody needs to have this record. There are also a lot of books, the 1,000 records you need to listen to before you die, for example. Those are all tropes, and I think they tell something about what the subculture is all about. After all that research, you fill in the subculture map again and maybe come with slightly different insights. So you have kind of a more in-depth idea of what the subculture is. And that's what you are going to use to go to the next step, namely the trends. So you can use Els Dracht for that, chapter 3. It's about scanning of the trends. And you can make a frame board out of the trend. A frame board is a board where you take one trend and try to describe it in depth. For example, I've chosen in this example for retribalization. So the idea, and it's also explained on the left, the idea that vinyl makes up for a new subculture where people are coming together, listening to music, collecting together, etc., etc. So the idea is that the value of the vinyl is not only in the actual kind of amount of money that you spend in the vinyl, but it's also a social factor, a meaningful factor within the friend group that you're in, within the people that you share those information with. So it's kind of more a community thing. And that is something different than before, where music, especially in the 2000s, was something that was not having this kind of community sense. So I've also added the macro, meso, and micro level for this frame. And you can read it here. And I think the part on the bottom right is, I think, the essence of what this frame is for me. and it's that communities are kind of are arising around the products, the vinyl, and that leads to a more meaningful consumption, a more meaningful way of engaging with the products, and so also less consumption in a capitalistic way. So I think this is a really interesting trend that I could kind of dive into even further to maybe kind of think about, is this trend a thing that I can maybe use in other subcultures, or could be introduced into mainstream culture if it comes, for example, to engage with other products, not only vinyl, but maybe also clothing, or I don't know. So that's kind of my first thought. And this is the end of the explore phase. After the explore phase, we'll go to the imagine phase. Remember, the tools I mentioned are only tools. So you have to use them like that. And most importantly, this is really fun exploring, so enjoy it. Bye.